بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Welcome back to another session with Miftāḥ Ṭarīq al-Muḥibbīn by the great Imām al-Wāsiṭī rahimahullah ta'ala. We're going to jump right into the text where we left off. In the next section, we're going to note that the journey begins to shift from the first station to the second, subsequent station, if you will. It's a progression of sorts that Imām al-Wāsiṭī is presenting to us in the spiritual wayfaring, sulūk. And this is going to shift to what he says or calls talab, irada, and shawq, okay? Which is essentially seeking, desiring, and yearning for. He says, وَالْمَرْتَبَةُ الثَّانِيَةُ مِنَ السُّلُوكِ فَهِيَ الطَّلَبُ وَالْإِرَادَةُ وَالشَّوْقِ إِلَى الْوُصُولِ وَالْقُرْبِ وَهَذَا شَأْنُ مَنْ ذَاقَ بِقَلْبِهِ شَيْئًا مِنَ اللَّوَائِحِ الْإِيمَانِيَّةِ وَوَجَدَ آثَارَ الصِّفَاتِ الْمُقَدَّسَةِ الْيَقِينِيَّةِ. So here he's basically saying that the second station of the spiritual path is seeking, desiring, and yearning. That's respectively talab, irada, and shawq. And we're going to be looking specifically at shawq in detail today. And that is for access, al-wusul, and nearness, al-qurb. And this is the state of one whose heart, this second station, is the business of, if you will, the interest of, the one whose heart has tasted the glimpses of faith's radiance and perceived traces of the absolute divine attributes, manifestations. Athar as-sifat. You can see the manifestations of Allah's divine attributes. So here in this phase, or this second station, the seeker is no longer simply restraining the limbs, preventing them from sin, as we discussed in earlier classes, or going through the motions of ritual worship. But now here, after doing all that we've discussed, the heart is stirred as it's tasted something of Allah's light, if you will. This is the lawa'ih al-imaniyah, the glimpses and the radiance of faith. It's like a sudden gleam of iman. And they have also glimpsed the sacred traces of Allah's attributes. They begin to identify the attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the manifestations of those in the world around them. And we discussed a little bit of this when standing in tahajjud prayer, that the mercy of Allah, the gentleness, the intimacy begins to manifest itself to a person that stands sincerely for Him in the depths of the night. A person can have such an experience, and then it can grow out from there. And the taste, that they get of this radiant faith, however faint it is enough to awaken the spirit into this yearning. So he says, وَمَتَى ذَاقَتِ الْقُلُوبُ شَيْئًا مِنْ ذَلِكَ لَمْ يُهُنْهَا عِيشٌ حَتَّى تَبْلُغَ مِنْ ذَلِكَ الذَّوْقِ إِلَى غَايَتِهِ وَكَمَالِهِ وَنِهَايَتِهِ. He says, once the heart tastes the slightest hint of it, it can no longer be content with mere existence until it obtains the fullness of that taste, its perfection, and ultimate fulfillment. Basically, once you've got a taste of it, everything else is flavorless. Once you've gotten a taste of that sweetness of the radiance of faith, then nothing compares to that flavor. And all you want to do to find contentment is to obtain the rest of it. You want more. And this is the hallmark, if you will, of true spiritual desire. So once a heart glimpse is a portion of divine intimacy, this qurb here, nothing else in the world can satisfy the heart. Doesn't matter comfort, wealth, reputation, even religious activity without presence, just mere ritualistic, performative behavior, they all feel hollow. That's why sometimes, even when you're praying, you're just like, I don't know. I hear this a lot. I don't feel anything in my prayer. I don't know why I'm praying. I'm just going through the motions. It's lifeless. It's dead. It's nothing there. So this type of, even the religious activity without presence, it's hollow. And so the heart with this is now being pulled by shawq, which is the yearning and the longing that overwhelms the seekers, even their own logic, and it's so powerful that it causes them or protects them from distraction. It resists all distraction of this world. The heart wants more of that longing. It doesn't need the world as much as it now needs to be in divine proximity, to have this qurb. It's better to unpack some of this, right? Because some of these terms may be new, unfamiliar, the realities of them. We turn to al-Ghazali, rahimahullah ta'ala, who Imam al-Wāsiṭī, of course, was influenced by. As you know, Imam al-Ghazali is considered one of the front runners, if you will, and leaders in the spiritual thought. His Ihya is a tremendous work in this field and has been embraced by the Ummah since it was penned. And he says that anyone that denies the reality of Mahabbah, first and foremost the love for Allah, must also deny the reality of shawq, or longing. Because longing is only conceivable toward one who is beloved. Right? So if you don't have the love, then you're not going to have the shawq. You have to love someone in order to long for them. So in this case, you have to love Allah first before you can long for Allah Azza wa Jal. So that's where the starting point is. It develops. First, you have to develop the love. How much do you love Allah? And we've been talking a little bit about how that is achieved. Okay? And then once that happens, eventually that love will create this longing, this yearning in your heart. Of course, I'm paraphrasing from Imam al-Ghazali. It's not a direct quote. This is kind of like a synthesis of what he says, because it's rather extensive, and I don't want to, get too lengthy with this. Just deliver some concepts. He says, so we can certainly affirm the existence of longing for Allah based on rational contemplation and transmitted reports. Right? So the two elements here. Rational thought, and then what's been reported from the Prophet ﷺ. Either it's found in the Quran or it's found in the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. So the first one, the rational basis for longing. So he says, just as love is affirmed, so too is longing. For every beloved who is absent, longing is inevitable. So when you are away from the one that you love, you begin to yearn for them. You want to be in their presence. Longing is not for what is fully present. Right? You don't long for or yearn for somebody that's with you, but for what is only partially experienced as well. It arises when something is known or glimpsed in part, but remains concealed in other aspects. If something is utterly unknown or forgotten, there is no longing for it. That's important. If something is utterly unknown or forgotten, there's no longing for it. Similarly, if something is fully possessed or seen, longing ceases. So just like if you have somebody with you constantly, that yearning, that longing for them, it's not present. Or you don't even know who it is, you don't have any connection to, haven't seen, you've forgotten about, it's been who knows how long since you even had a thought of them, you're not going to be longing or yearning for them. They're forgotten about. And this is often explained with analogies. A devoted or lover may see a faint glimpse of their beloved from behind thick veils. That glimpse stirs desire to witness their full beauty. Or one may know their beloved has beautiful qualities like their hair or their voice, etc., that they've never fully seen or heard, but this produces a longing to now see and to experience. They have this yearning for it. And these two scenarios apply to every person who has awareness or who is an arif of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because they've witnessed some of the truths of Allah's majesty, but only partially. When it comes to us in the world, we're not going to witness Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His full glory and majesty, in His full jalal wal jamal, right? We're only going to see the manifestations of His divine attributes in the world around us. We're only going to experience it partially. We know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always accompanied by a veil. And then what's left is our imagination and distraction that, of course, clouds our full perception. And the perfect clarity, if you will, if we could say such a thing, or unveiling of that, only occurs in the hereafter. Until then, this longing remains a necessary condition or experience of the devoted, al-Muḥibb, you could say the lover. So there are two types of longing that he mentions here. There are two categories. First, the longing to complete what has already been partially seen or tasted. Okay? The longing to complete what has already been partially seen or tasted. And this ends in the hereafter with the witnessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what's known as ru'ya, al-ru'ya, or al-liqa. Okay, we've talked about that in other works, the reality of the ru'ya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And it cannot be fulfilled in this world, that feeling of yearning. The second is longing for what one has never known or seen at all. And this has no end, not even in the hereafter. Because the majesty and the beauty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has no limit, that every ruh, if you will, or nafs, only will experience a part of it. And so their longing continues eternally in paradise. There's two levels of this. One that will end when you're in Jannah and you are in the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and one that will continue onward eternally. Which means that the pleasure of the righteous in the hereafter is not merely what they possess, but also from the infinite unfolding of divine beauty, always revealing more to them. So this yearning is a pleasurable experience. It gives rise to an ongoing, sweet kind of longing, a yearning without pain, filled with spiritual delight. It's possible that this unending increase in nearness and vision becomes the cause of an ever-increasing bliss in Jannah. So that gives you a couple of two different categories or levels, if you will, of this shawq. He also says, he mentions some testimonies from the saints. He says an anecdote is mentioned from Ibrahim ibn Adham, who was a great Sufi saint. We'll talk about him shortly. And he says, one day I said, "O Lord, if you have given any of your devoted something that brings peace to their hearts before meeting you, then grant it to me, because this anxiety is overwhelming me." Like the anxiety to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He said, I saw in a dream that I stood before Allah, and He said, "O Ibrahim, are you not ashamed to ask me to give your heart rest before meeting me?" Like, why would you ask for such a thing? Can a lover find peace before meeting his beloved? It's not possible. He said, I replied, "O Lord, I'm lost in love. I don't even know what to say. Forgive me and teach me what to ask for." He said, "Say, O Allah, make me content with your decree, patient with your trials, and grant me gratitude for your blessings." In Arabic, it's Allahumma raddini biqada'ik wa sabbirni ala bala'ik wa awzi'ni shukra ni'ma'ik. So this is the supplication that Ibrahim ibn Adham was taught in a dream by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ibrahim ibn Adham, by the way, passed away around 165 Hijrah, so it's from the very early generations. He was a renowned Muslim Sufi master, ascetic, originally was royalty of a region known as Balkh. This is in today's Afghanistan. He lived a royal life, which he ended up renouncing to pursue a path of spiritual poverty and devotion. And he became kind of like a wanderer, a kind of pseudo-traveler, and would travel around, living like very minimally. He was known for his deep trust in Allah, love of solitude, and emphasis on sincerity. And he's been considered a model of zuhud, as well as shawq, right? Asceticism, renunciation of the world, and divine longing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the first type of longing ends in the hereafter. This is Imam al-Ghazali kind of wrapping up. The second type continues forever. As there is always more divine majesty yet to be unveiled. And perhaps there's a verse in the Quran in Surah Al-Tahrim. I believe this is verse number 8. نُورُهُمْ يَسْعَى بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَبِأَيْمَانِهِمْ يَقُولُونَ رَبَّنَا أَتْمِمْ لَنَا نُورَنَا وَاغْفِرْ لَنَا إِنَّكَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. They say, their light will shine before them on their right side, saying, our Lord, complete for us our light, as if the light is incomplete. And they're asking for it to be completed. And, وَاغْفِرْ لَنَا, pardon us, for you are capable of all things. This is a hint at this unending increase. They're asking for it to be completed, as if it's yet to be fulfilled. And then, of course, there's evidences found in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. There's numerous evidences to support the concept of shawq. Among them is a very well-known supplication of the Prophet ﷺ. He says, Allahumma bi'ilmika al-ghayb wa qudrika ala al-khalq أحييني ما علمت الحياة خيرا لي وتوفني إذا علمت الوفاة خيرا لي اللهم أسألك خشيتك يعني في الغيب والشهادة وأسألك كلمة الحكم في الرضا والغضب وأسألك القسط في الفقر والغنى وأسألك نعيما لا يبيد وأسألك قرة عين لا ينقطع وأسألك الرضا بعد القضاء وأسألك برد العيش بعد الموت وأسألك لذة النظر إلى وجهك والشوق إلى لقائك في غير ضراء ومضرة ولا فتنة مضلة اللهم زينا بزينة الإيمان واجعلنا هداة مهتدين. This means, O Allah, by your knowledge of the unseen and your power over creation, let me live as long as you know that life is better for me, and take me when you know that death is better for me. O Allah, I ask you for fear of you in private and in public. I ask you for a word of truth in times of contentment and in times of ease. I ask you for moderation in wealth and in poverty. I ask you for everlasting bliss and for the coolness of the eye that never ceases. I ask you for contentment after decree and for pleasant life after death. I ask you for the delight of gazing at your noble wedge and longing, he says, and asking for a shawq. This is the point here, the evidence from the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. And I ask that you give me shawq to meet you, have this longing and yearning to meet you without any harmful distress or misleading trial. O Allah, adorn us with adornment of faith and make us among those who guide and are rightly guided. You find this in Sunnah Nisa'i as well as Musnad Imam Ahmad. There's also other reports. Abu Darda, for example, you have to remember this companion's name, Abu Darda. If you remember Salman al-Farisi and Abu Darda, the great story between the two, where Abu Darda, he was known for his reluctance towards the dunya, and this story is well known. He was married at home. Salman al-Farisi, who was considered his brother based on al-Mu'akha, with the fraternity in Islam, went to visit and found Abu Darda's wife. She basically said, your brother has no need for the dunya. Because he saw his wife and noticed that she was wearing kind of like the work clothes, if you will. And he's like, what's up with you? And she said, your brother has no need for the dunya, meaning no need for me. That's why I'm looking raggedy. Right? So then, because the etiquette was not to be that way. Right? The etiquette of the wife was not to be raggedy at home. Okay? It was to be plain and common if she went outside, and to be well presentable inside for her husband. Okay? Not the opposite way, which may be commonplace today. Raggedy at home, and then primped up and ready to go for the outside world. Okay? So that's why it's like, ma sha'nuki, what's wrong with you? Right away I could tell something's wrong because this is how you're looking like at home. There must be something wrong. He's got no need for the dunya. He goes in to see Abu Darda, and the conversation transpires. There's a whole thing about, you know, he's fasting, he's wanting to pray all night. Salman is trying to get him to take it down a notch and to have a balance. You cannot, sacrifice your worldly responsibilities for your spiritual pursuits. And eventually it got to the point the Prophet ﷺ agreed with Salman. All right, but the reason why I mentioned that to you is because Abu Darda in this narration says to Ka'b, he says, tell me about the most exclusive verse. And he's referring to the Torah. Ka'b replies, he says, Allah says in the Torah, long has the yearning of the righteous for my meeting endured. The yearning here is the shawq. And indeed, my yearning to meet them is even more intense. So Ka'b, he adds, and written beside it is, whoever seeks me shall find me, and whoever seeks other than me shall not find me. Abu Darda then said, I bear witness that I heard the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam say this. Okay? In agreement with what? Ka'b is relating from the Torah. About the longing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, something that is ever present. Right, so long as there are the lovers of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there will be this shawq, or this longing and yearning to be with Him. This is not an imaginary concept, but it is an essential truth, and it's rooted not only in reason, as Imam al-Ghazali mentions, in transmitted knowledge, as we can see from the hadith, that prayer from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then of course the eternal nature of the divine here, as Ka'b relates in previous scriptures. Right, so that gives you an idea of shawq as its concept and its realities. So Imam al-Wāsiṭī then goes and gives us a more evocative image, perhaps one of the most evocative images in his entire text here. He says, وَكَانَ مَثَلُ هَذَا الذَّائِقِ لَهَا كَمَثَلِ شَخْصٍ رَأَى مِنْ وَرَاءٍ حُجَبٍ كَثِيفَةٍ شَيْئًا مِنْ لَمَحَاتِ مَحْبُوبٍ فَاقَ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ في الملاحة والجمال والحسن والكمال ولم يحققه ببصره ولكن لاحت له لمحات منه على بعد من الدار فهيجت أشواقه إليه وتعلقت الروح به فلا تزال الروح مجذوبة إليه مشتاقة إلى لقائه وقد شغلها عن ذلك الشواغل من أمور الطبيعة ولكنه متى صفى قلبه وخلا هاج وَتَأَجَّجَتْ نِيرَانُهُ. He says here, such a person, the one that has this yearning, is like one who catches a fleeting glimpse of their beloved from behind thick veils, a vision surpassing all beauty, elegance, excellence, and perfection. Though they cannot fully perceive them with their eyes, the fleeting glimmers from afar ignite their longing. Remember, we were talking about the concept of shawq being, it's not something that's right near to you. It's not something that you fully experience, and because of that, you're drawn. You want to be in their company or to experience that. So here, the fleeting glimmers from afar ignite that longing, and the ruh, the spirit, becomes captivated by them, drawn irresistibly toward reunion. His spirit remains enchanted, yearning for the moment of encounter, yet distractions of the natural world pull them away. But when the heart becomes pure and emptied, it stirs and its flames of longing blaze intensely. So the parable here that Imam al-Wāsiṭī gives us, it gives every lover of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? This is a parable. The seeker has not yet seen the beloved in full, but he has caught glimmers. And that's why he said, you get little glimpses of these manifestations, tajalliyat, etc. It's like a flicker of light. It's a spiritual moment that you might have in prayer. A verse that might have entered into your heart. A silent night where the presence of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is almost tangible, as we mentioned in standing in prayer. It's almost as if it's happening right then. And this single experience can be enough to captivate your heart in love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All right, but the glimpse that you have is veiled. It's distant. The beloved is close, but hidden. That brings us back to the concept of fawqiyah, okay? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being beyond this world but close in many other ways, in His knowledge and Him being aware of what it is that we do, providing for us, etc. All those things. There's this kind of element to it that, as he says, close yet hidden, removed. And so the ruh, the spirit, weeps when far, and even when close, it fears separation. So the Imam concludes, or includes here, to kind of really deliver the point in a very poetic way, 2 lines of poetry that capture the emotional contradiction of the seeker. He says, كَمَا قِيلَ وَمَا فِي الْأَرْضِ أَشْقَى مِن مُحِبٍّ وَإِنْ وَجَدَ الْهَوَى حُلْوُ الْمَذَاقِ فَيَبْكِي إِنْ نَأَوْا شَوْقًا إِلَيْهِمْ وَيَبْكِي إِنْ دَنَوْا خَوْفَ الْفِرَاقِ. He says here, as has been said, there is none on earth more anguished than a lover. Even when they find love's taste to be sweet, they weep when apart out of longing for the other, and fearing separation when together they weep. So this is the condition of one who has begun to truly love Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Their desire is no longer rooted in paradise or fear of hell. It is a hunger, a desire for them to be near to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So they're marked by this type of contradiction. There's a joy in love, and then there's a pain in that yearning. They don't want to be separated. They want to be together, and then they're worried when they're together. So they're yearning when they're apart, and then they're worrying when they're together. I want to be with you, and when I'm with you, I'm worried that we're going to be separated. So there's tranquility and closeness, and then there's fear in losing that closeness. Okay? He mentions another series of lines of poetry here. He says, وَبَدَ لَهُ مِنْ بُعْدِ مَنْ دَمَلَ الْهَوَى بَرْقٌ تَأَلَّقَ مُوهِنًا لَمَعَانُ يَبْدُو لِحَاشِيَةِ الرِّدَاءِ وَدُونَهُ سَعْبُ الضَّرَى مُمْتَنِئٌ أَرْكَانُ فَبَدَى لِيَنْظُرَ كَيْفَ لَاحَ فَلَمْ يُطِقْ نَظْرًا إِلَيْهِ وَصَعْدَهُ سُبْحَانَهُ سِجَانُهُ فَنَارٌ مَا اشْتَمَلَتْ عَلَيْهِ الضُّلُوعُ وَالْمَاءُ مَا صَفَحَتْ بِهِ أَجْفَانُ. So here is another line of poetry. It reads, just when a lover's wounds have finally healed, a flicker of lightning waning and weak, appearing beyond at the hem of the veil, high peaks untouchable, forbidding and steep, it became clear so that he might dare to gaze, unable to endure and repelled by his captor. Thus fire in his chest was set ablaze, and from his eyes came the flowing of water. And so the second poem here, or these lines of the poem, they intensify the emotional imagery of this experience. So basically what it's saying is that when the seeker finally settles down, when they finally begin to calm, then there is a flash of lightning. It's like a strike of divine beauty, but it's just a flash. It's barely perceptible. But because of that flash, it reignites the fire of longing. They begin to yearn again. And when they want to look, they're unable to because the majesty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is too overwhelming. And so the ruh, it burns, tears flow, and yearning takes over once again. All right? While it might sound painful, one of the greats, Ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, he said that as for shawq, or yearning to meet Allah in this worldly life, it is the greatest delight attained by the arifin. It's the greatest the delight that you can attain as a person who has knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this world. Whoever finds intimate companionship with Allah in this life and longs to meet Him has attained the most profound pleasure a human being can experience in this realm. And he mentions a number of quotes. Abu Darda, go back to him, he used to say, I love death out of longing to meet my Lord mighty and majestic. Abu Utbah al-Khawlani, he said, your brothers used to prefer meeting Allah even over martyrdom. One of them used to say, when I remember the moment of arrival before Allah, my yearning for death becomes more intense than the thirst of a severely parched man in an unbearably hot day longing for cool, refreshing water. Rabi'a would say, the days and nights have grown long for me due to my yearning to meet Allah. Time is just It's going slow, slow. You know when you're waiting for somebody to arrive? Seems like it's 1 hour goes by, so it feels like it's 5 hours. So slow. Because you're anticipating, waiting on every second. His days and nights have grown so long. And unfortunately, the most common complaint about time today is, it's going so fast. It's going by so fast. Time's flying by. Because we're entrenched in it. We're entrenched in it, so it goes by rather quickly. You'll notice that's how it works as well. That's how it goes. If you're entrenched in it, the time will just fly by. And there are numerous other narrations like this. Greats of the past. They would have this strong desire and yearning to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the section of this book here, once we get past this part, it begins to transition. It transitions, obviously, to the path of the heart now, as opposed to the outward path, right? Ridding the heart of disease and then the outward actions of righteousness. And now we're talking about the path of the heart that's not just about obedience or knowledge, but it's driven by love and yearning for the nearness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the second station of sulūk begins not with effort, but with this taste, something that sets the heart ablaze. And that taste becomes a fire that cannot be quenched by anything other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so some of the signs, if you will, of this station would be, for example, that you're no longer content with basic rituals. You feel relentless without solitude. You feel restless without solitude. You need to be alone. You want to be alone so that you can have those precious moments in worship and devotion, in prayer and in dhikr. You cry easily in worship, perhaps. You long to be with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the majority of your time. And that longing, as painful as it may feel, it's one of the greatest gifts that you have received. It goes on in the next section here, describing the nature of this shawq, the taste of the glimpse of divine majesty, if you will, shifts focus from the sweetness of that longing to its potential dangers if it's left unguarded. Okay, right? Shawq can lead you into trouble if you're not careful. Like the intensity of this yearning can develop, and while it is a noble station, if you will, it can become overwhelming if you do not have wise guidance and balanced spiritual training to keep you on the path. So that's when he says, فَمِثْلُ هَذَا إِذَا لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ أُسْتَاذٌ عَارِفٌ أَوْ قَرِينٌ نَاصِحٌ يُرْشِدُهُ فِي حَيْرَتِهِ. So here we're looking at a foundational principle in the path. And basically what he's saying is that this type of person, if they don't have a knowledgeable ustad, a teacher who has experiential knowledge in the realm of spirituality, or a sincere companion who can guide them out of the bewilderment that they're experiencing, that they need to have someone, it's like you can't walk the path alone. You have to have guidance. It would be like a patient self-prescribing medicine for deep ailments. I mean, some things are easy to address. I have a headache, okay, I know what to take. But it's like somebody that has something serious going on and they're just trying to figure it out. Self-medicating, self-prescribing, going online and getting all kind of stuff, have no idea what they're looking at. You actually need someone in your life that's going to help interpret your states, your spiritual states, like the doctor would interpret your physical condition and health. You need somebody trained enough that can interpret your physical states in order to provide you with a prescription to keep you balanced as you proceed. That's why he says, قَدْ يُخْشَى عَلَيْهِ أَن تَقْطَعُهُ الْفَاقَاتِ وَالْمُجَاهَدَاتِ وَالرِّيَاضَاتِ فَيَنْحَرِفُ لِذَلِكَ مِزَاجُهُ وَيَفْسُدُ حَالُهُ لِانْحِرَافِ مِزَاجِ قَلْبِهِ فَيَفُوتُهُ الْمَطْلُوبِ. He says he is at risk of being overwhelmed by hardships, excessive struggle, and intense spiritual exercise. And this may disturb that person's temperament and disrupt his spiritual state due to the imbalance that he has in his heart, causing him to miss out on the true goal. Okay, this could cause an imbalance, this shawq, if you're not careful, pushing yourself into a certain direction. So the Imam here is cautioning us that without proper guidance, the very tools of spiritual growth, the tools that are needed, as he mentions, al-faqat, these are like deprivations, mujahadat, struggles that you put yourself into, or riyadat, these are disciplines of a spiritual nature. They could end up backfiring on you. Instead of elevating the servant, they exhaust their body, destabilize their emotions, or even worse, distort their beliefs. And this is a known phenomenon in the history of spirituality. This is something that is tried and true, where sincere seekers, they begin, they overextend themselves, and they burn out. Or worse, they fall into delusion and misguidance. They go off into a deviated path. ومثل هذا يحتاج إلى سياسة لطيفة تتم بها مصالحه في أمور دينه ودنياه وآخرته بمعونة الله وتوفيقه. Such a seeker requires gentle guidance that preserves his well-being regarding his religion, his worldly life, and hereafter, all with Allah's aid and granting of success. So here he's talking about siyasa latifa, and siyasa here means more than just management. It kind of indicates a nurturing or wise care. It's like a subtle calibration of sorts, siyasa latifa. It's much like a shepherd that's tending to a flock of sheep. The sheep are fragile animals. They have to be dealt with care and concern. It's like you're treating a physician treating a sensitive patient. And then when he says latifa, this underscores the need for delicacy. It can't be harsh discipline. It can't be overbearing schedules. Okay? That's very important. And I think that has some applications for us, for those of us that are parents trying to raise children that are growing in this direction. That it requires siyasa latifa. You have to be gentle in your management, in guiding them, so that you don't overwhelm them and drive them into the wrong direction. You don't want to be overbearing. The spiritual mentor has to adjust as well to the seeker's practice, the seeker's needs. Has to adjust the routine, the practices. Right? Sometimes it may call for a little bit of this. Sometimes it may call for a little bit more of that. Right? You have to be able to adjust. That's what the murshid is for, the guide along the path. He's there to help. The ustad, arif, he's there to help and say, hey, what are you, to be able to assess the situation. To create a balance here. As he mentions, Imām al-Wāsiṭī, that true spiritual guidance is holistic. It completes everything. It doesn't just prepare you for the hereafter, but it harmonizes your being with your faith and with your worldly, your dunya. It harmonizes the both. And then, of course, your ultimate destiny in the hereafter. This is the final phase. And this grounds everything in divine reality. Even the best of teachers, the sincerest of efforts, and the most balanced path is fruitless without Allah's support and tawfiq, as he says, بِمَعُونَةِ اللَّهِ وَتَوْفِيقِهِ. The next part he says, وَأَوَّلُ ذَلِكَ دَوَامُ الْإِلْتِجَاءِ إِلَى اللَّهِ عَزَّ وَجَلَّ فَإِنَّهُ لَا يُنَجِّي مِنَ الْمَهَالِكِ وَالْمَتَالِفِ فِي أَسْفَارِ الدُّنْيَا وَالْآخِرَةِ إِلَّا اللَّهِ وَلَا يُوصِلُ إِلَى اللَّهِ إِلَّا اللَّهِ وَهَذَا أَوَّلُ الْأَمْرِ وَأَسَاسُهُ. The first step is to constantly seek refuge in Allah, the Mighty Majestic, for none can save him from destruction and devastation in the journeys of this world and the hereafter except for him. And none can lead to Allah except Allah himself. None can lead you to Allah except for Allah himself. And this is the foundation and beginning of the path. Right? لا تهدي من أحببت ولكن الله يهدي من يشاء. You don't guide who you love. He's addressing the Prophet, but Allah guides those who he wills. Okay, this is where the journey must begin. With the heart firmly lodged in divine refuge. And the word he's using here is iltija, seeking refuge. It's like what they call refugees. but you're seeking refuge with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's more than just asking for help, but it's surrendering, it's clinging to, it's anchoring yourself to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and considering Him the only safe haven from the world's pitfalls and perils. And then he talks about the journeys that you'll have, and this is a metaphor for the path of life and the afterlife, the journeys that you're going to take, whether in spiritual hardship, worldly affliction, or fear of divine judgment. Only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can deliver the servants. There's no effort, there's no knowledge, no asceticism, no status that will get you there without Allah. وَلَا يُوصِلُ إِلَى اللَّهِ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. That none can lead to Allah except Allah Himself. And this is a powerful phrase. It's a cornerstone, if you will. It's the foundation of the Sufi way. No amount of effort, striving, or purification will avail without Allah's guidance and permission. It's a humbling truth. And it's one that reframes all spiritual work as something that's dependent upon Allah's acceptance and divine grace. And this is mentioned in the Quran, وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ إِلَّا أَن يَشَاءَ اللَّهُ. Very simple verse. You will not do, وَمَا تَشَاءُونَ. You do not will, you do not will unless Allah wills. Let alone arrive. You can't even will a thing unless Allah has willed it, meaning He has decreed for that to happen. Let alone will you actually be successful. It's like a structure. It can't stand firm without a foundation. And the spiritual path cannot begin, let alone endure and be successful without recognizing that all success and protection, all arrival is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this echoes one of the prophetic du'ā's in which he says, Allahumma la takilni ila nafsi tarfata ayn. He says, Oh Allah, do not leave me to myself even for the blink of an eye. So وَلِيَعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْجُوعَ الْمُفْرِطَ مُضِرٌ كَمَا أَنَّ الشِّبْعَ الْمُفْرِطَ مُضِرٌ والخروج من الأسباب الدنيوية التي تتم بها المعيشة مضر كما أن الانهماك فيها والتكالب عليها مضر. The seeker must also recognize that extreme hunger is harmful, just as excessive indulgence in food is harmful. Likewise, abandoning worldly means entirely is detrimental, just as immersing oneself in them excessively and clinging to them greedily is destructive. And this is when we begin to shift. In the next section, we're going to be talking about a balance in greater detail. However, to conclude, you should understand that this way is not about running away from the world. But it's also not about drowning in the world as well. So Imām al-Wāsiṭī advocates a middle way, engaging with worldly means without attachment and abstaining from obsession or total withdrawal. Okay, this aligns with the prophetic way, alayhi salatu wasalam, where he would engage in trade, he was married, he had kids, he was a leader of a state, yet his heart was fully with Allah. So there's a danger here that we have to be aware of, right? Without a balance. Exiting worldly means entirely, such as food, work, family, under the banner of zuhud. I'm staying away. This may lead to physical or psychological harm. It may lead to deviance. Or being obsessed with worldly gains. This traps the heart in distraction and veils it from the beloved. We have to think about the great hadith that embodies this. The Prophet ﷺ, this is narrated by Ibn Umar, he says, أَخَذَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهِ وَسَلَّمَ بِمَنْكِبِي. The Prophet took hold of my shoulder and he says, كُنْ فِي الدُّنْيَا كَأَنَّكَ غَرِيبٌ أَوْ عَابِرِ السَّبِيلِ. He says, be in this world as if you're a stranger or a traveler passing through. You find this in Sahih Bukhari. So the hadith note here doesn't call us to abandon the world. Kun fi dunya. Be in the world. You're in it. You have to be a part of it. But how? You have to be there. You have to relate to it wisely, like a traveler who uses what he needs for the road, but he doesn't build a house every time he stops along the journey. I'm on a journey. I'm going to pull over. I got to stop for a minute. Let me build this beautiful castle. Let me take off again. Another beautiful castle. How far are you going to get? How far are you going to get before it's over? You stopped every time to create your Jannah on earth. It doesn't exist. You're in the world, but you're not consumed by it. Stranger lives among people, but doesn't fully settle. As he says, gharib. A wayfarer takes what helps, reach the destination and nothing more. So this is an invitation of sorts, not to extremism in asceticism, but to a kind of spiritual minimalism grounded in clarity of your purpose. And it doesn't mean that, this was what I would say, is that this minimalism, spiritual minimalism, meaning you're practicing minimalism for a spiritual reason, is a general prescription for most people, because most of us were plagued by the love of the world. But it doesn't mean that you have to go without. In fact, you could have everything and still be a zahid, where your heart is detached from all of those things, meaning that you would be the same with it or without it. Whether you had it or you didn't, you'd still be the same, and that is traveling towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? So essentially what I'm getting at is the matter at hand, it lies within. But sometimes we require to set the stage externally. Sometimes we need to go through these exercises and disciplines and say, look, I know I've got 5 pairs of shoes, and because of that, I'm not going to go for a 6th pair. Alaikum salam. Understand? Yeah, I don't need that. As a spiritual exercise, I'm going to deny myself. I got the money. I got the, no problem. I could spoil myself, treat myself. But as a spiritual exercise, I'm saying, look, I'm going to detach myself from the world a bit. I need this right now. Maybe down the road, as we're going to come to learn, that might be something that's on the table. Until then, jazakallah khair for your attention and attentive listening. Conclude here. Wa sallallahu alaihi wa sallam ala nabiyyina Muhammad.